Everybody, my name is Paul. I'm a country realtor and I practice in the western part of Virginia near the Blue Ridge Mountains in Lexington, Virginia. And I'm a very avid fan of homesteading lifestyle, living the country life, the rural life, and I've made a lot of videos about it. And today I'm going to address a very popular subject, the solar energy situation of what's going on right now. And this video is going to give you 10 good reasons why solar may not be or is not the right answer for a long-term solution for power. And I'll give you some good reasons. Now, before I get started here, I'm not going to try to say that solar is all bad. Of course, there's definitely a place for solar energy use, solar panels and that sort of thing in the general energy use of a household. But to get started here, one of the reasons that I want to make this video is because of the cost. A lot of people get sold on the idea that if they just put a bunch of solar panels in their home, on their roof somewhere, maybe in their yard, that they're suddenly going to have like no electric bill, and that's going to like save them tons and tons of money every month and so on. And the problem with that, there really is not, you can't really calculate. No company can give you a guarantee of how much solar energy you're going to get and how much money you're going to be able to save. You see, so it all depends on your usage and the angle of the sun and so on. So from the start, a solar energy installation, a solar panel installation can be very, very costly, and you'll find out that it takes a whole lot of kilowatt hours on your regular electric bill to pay for a $10,000 system, and it could be even much more than that. So that's one thing. The cost generally does not outweigh the ordinary way of getting electricity in most situations. It's not a rule of thumb completely, of course, but for example, if you have a household that you have a couple hundred things plugged in the wall, or maybe not even that many, but you got a refrigerator, air conditioner, washer, dryer, electric stove, you got things like that, fans, all those kind of things use a lot of electricity. So you could be running your solar thing completely, and you may need 5,000 watts or 5 kilowatts to run your household, but you only got a 4 kilowatt system installed, you see. So now that's one reason, the cost, and I want to get back to that later perhaps. The next thing is that they're very inefficient. Solar cells, the technology that they are getting better, of course, but the mining and the production cost of solar cells is really dirty. It's not really a pleasant thing to mine all that silicon and make all those panels, but they're not very efficient. See, even if you have a really great panel on your roof, the problem is that the household where the angle of your roof is may not match the angle where the best sun angle is. And if you have some of these modern houses, and some of them have like all these different edges and different kinds of roof lines, and they're all integrated in one, and there's no real good place to put a big, large solar bank, you see. Now you can mount several of them, and one this angle, one that way. It's just, it kind of defeats the purpose. So now that's one part of the efficiency, the shading and the angle of the sun and so on. Now the other side of it is that the quality of the solar panels themselves make a big difference, and your latitude and longitude, especially your latitude, makes a big difference, because if you don't have the space in your yard or on your roof to put all those solar panels, you know, I lived in a small house one time, and we had someone come and take a look at the house, and yeah, it was a nice, cute little house, and it had a gentle little roof, and we could easily get the panels up there, but big problem, for the half of the morning it was shaded on one side, and then had nice sun for a while. So the guy said, well, you got to put the solar panels out here in the yard. And I said, well, how much space is that going to take? And he drew kind of a line. I go, okay. And then the other side was the cost, because it was going to cost, I think at that time, it was way back at least 10, 12 years ago at least. And I think it was something like $18,000. And since then, the panels have upgraded. And now here's another particular reason. The solar technology keeps improving. You see, 10 years ago was very different. So let's say you put all these solar panels on your roof, and you get them all installed and everything, and now you got a big fat bill that, yeah, you have a big bill. Let's say you have 10,000 going in, and then you got to like, okay, maybe you're saving $100 a month or $200 a month or whatever, and slowly but surely you are subtracting from that initial expense. But that takes a really long time to get there and pay that off. So meanwhile, the technology gets upgraded, you see. So let's say you have the solar panel installation that you paid 10 grand for, and that's not even a very big one, and then, you know, 5 or 6 years go down the road and you're saving a little bit of money, little by little, and maybe you paid off even 5,000 of it, okay? But now the new technology comes out, you see. What are you going to do? Now you're stuck with the old one, and all the new technology comes out, and maybe it's a lot better and a lot smaller, so then you got a problem. Just like, remember, people had those big, huge satellite dishes on homes. I lived in a home one time when we bought it. They had this huge, giant dish. It was like 6 feet wide. It was so ugly. And by the time we moved in, that was really old technology. So they had, you know, either cable or just a little dish on the top of your roof or something. So the technology does change, and that makes a huge difference. And it also tends to go down in price. So that's another reason. Updating. Now, another thing is roof repair. Let's say you put that thing on and it covers a big portion of your roof. And I've seen them. I'm a realtor. I walk around. I see people with those big solar installations. And I think, well, that's nice on a brand new roof, but sooner or later, you're going to have to replace that roof. If you put a whole bunch of solar panels on an old roof, you have a few years down the road, then you got to put a new roof on. Then you got to take all those solar panels off again and reinstall them and fix your roof. So that's a big problem. So if you're going to put solar panels, then try to put it on a brand new roof so that you don't have that situation developing. And many times in the countryside, you can have a branch fall down your tree, a tree branch fall down your house roof, and boy, it'll destroy that solar panel in a second. Plus, it'll destroy your roof. Now, I mentioned not being able to sell much of the money back to the grid because they always tell you, oh yeah, during the big months you're going to be getting so much solar, you're going to be selling it back to the grid. Not necessarily. That's the theory, but in practice, they can juggle any numbers in a spreadsheet, and the salesperson can tell you, hey, you know, during the month of July, then you're going to get so much sun, and you're going to be paying back. Your bill's going to be like half what it's supposed to be normally, you know. And you start thinking, well, in July, I also use the air conditioner a lot in July. My refrigerator's working overtime in July. So your consumption also goes up in July, perhaps. So, you know, and then in the wintertime, the sun angle. See, if you can't rotate the angle of your solar panels, they have to be ideally positioned. Ideally, they should be like 90 degrees to the sun. So if you got the sun up this way, and you got the solar panels this way, then they kind of like, okay, it's beautiful, okay, it comes right down and it's a direct angle. But if the sun is down at a low angle in the wintertime, and then your angle is not efficient anymore, you see, so you're going to get less power at different times. Now you can average it out. You can average it out in a way of, okay, well, we'll put the angle of my solar panel somewhere in the middle there that it kind of like gets. It's not quite the best in the winter or the summer, but it's sort of good most of the year or whatever. So you can try to do that. Now, solar panels take up a lot of room. And like I mentioned, the angle of your particular roof may not be very compatible with the solar, especially in a suburb. You get into some of these suburbs and there's like houses every way, which way they put all these different angles here. And they don't think about putting an ideal solar thing on your roof when they build those houses. They just build them, you know, whatever fits their plan, and they don't care what angle the roof is. They just, in the old days, people did maybe a simpler house with just two sides like that, and that's it, and it's easy to put panels on, and you have one panel, one side facing south and the other side facing north. Well, that can work pretty well. Now, there's a few other things I want to get to. One is the electronics, okay? The electronics on these things is quite complicated because they have a voltage regulator and a whole panel. You have to put that in the basement somewhere. So it's not just the things on your roof. You got to have a place in the basement or your garage or wherever, somewhere, to put all the electronics and the batteries. And some of those batteries are also very expensive. So if you don't have a battery backup system that's always charging, then when the power goes off, and sooner it will, solar power units can go off. I mean, nighttime or trees or some other kind of situation, like maybe snow covers it or something, and now you don't have any power coming in, so you got to have a battery backup system. Maybe sometimes snow comes down, and in some areas of the country you get like 2 feet of snow on the roof, and your solar panels are not going to work at all at that situation. So it really makes a difference. You got to have some room for those electronics. And electronics need servicing. There'll be times when something happens. You have a power outage in general in the area, and it might, you know, turn off that electronic system for a while, because you got to have a constant monitoring of your panels to regulate that power coming in and direct it to the batteries and then direct it into your house. So definitely you need that place for electronics. Now, cosmetics. This is another thing that a lot of people don't think about. A lot of people actually don't want a bunch of solar panels on their house. You know what I mean? There's plenty of people who want a home, and they want a beautiful home, and the last thing they want to see when they come to their house is a whole bunch of stuff on their roof. You know, it does affect the retail value, the resale value of your home. Now, there are times when someone is selling a home and they have solar panels and they find a nice buyer and say, hey man, I really like those solar panels on there, but maybe by that time the electronics is old. So let's say you have a nice little solar panel situation on your house, and you keep the house for 10 years, and then you sell it, and the guy says, well, I really like those solar panels, but now they're outdated, and I got to do all the electronics over, so thank you very much, but it doesn't really look nice either, and I don't think I'm going to buy it. Or I might buy it, but I'm going to get a discount for taking all those old panels off. And you see how that works? The cosmetics in a certain neighborhood, especially if you're going to put them in your yard. Now, I've seen people where they have a house and then they have some open space near there, maybe a yard or adjoining vacant property or something, and then they put their solar panels out there. But, you know, they're not that attractive, and they take up a good portion of the yard. If you have a bunch of kids or something, you know, you don't want things falling on that thing, because you'll crush the solar panel very quickly. So that's a factor to remember too, that if you put the solar panels like in arm's reach on your yard somewhere, then, you know, there's a lot of potential for different kinds of damage, especially if you have an active yard or trees nearby. Now, let's see if I covered everything. I covered the inefficiency, the space that's needed, the roof repair covers, roof angles. Technology is updated. It's hard to sell much of the electricity back to the grid. Now, I want to get into the possible good things about having solar, because I really don't believe it's all negative. Okay, I don't want to give that impression at all. I studied electronics when I was much younger, and I know quite a bit about that. And I used to be a hobbyist and make things and fix things, and I worked for Xerox for a number of years fixing their machines. So I do know about electricity. And there is a very, very strong, good use for solar panels if you keep some of these other things in mind. For example, a lot of our devices don't use a lot of power. You know, we have 120 volts coming out of our wall, and then 220 if it's a dryer or something. And then you have all these devices that use 12 volts, 5 volts, 7 volts. So you're stepping down all that electricity just to charge your phone. You're losing a lot of efficiency when you plug your phone into the wall, because, yeah, it'll charge, but it's going to take that 220, and you see those little blocks that they plug into the wall that you put your USB in. You notice how they heat up? It's because that's wasted electricity. Now, if you have a garage, for example, on your property, and the roof is reasonable and easy to reach, and it's in the backyard or something, you put some solar panels on there, because sometimes the garage might be situated in a better way than the house itself. Put your panels on, and then you can have all the stuff in the garage, electronics and the battery banks and so on, maybe a separate building or an outbuilding or a shed or something, and then you have a very, very good backup power, because if it's charging those batteries and then you do have a regular power outage with the grid then you have at least enough power to charge your devices and so on, and some other things. And maybe it isn't completely efficient, and maybe it does go dark at night and you can't charge, but it still is something better than nothing, because if you don't have anything backup in power for your home, then when the grid goes down, you really truly are stuck. But as you know, we have like maybe 100 things plugged into our walls. We don't need all of them during a power outage. So it does make sense to have a reasonable backup system that can do something extra. It's a really good backup system to add to the generation of power for your homestead and property. Maybe you can put it on a barn or something, or maybe you can find a place where, on a hill where there's a beautiful sun exposure and it doesn't affect the cosmetics of the property. You can put a bunch of solar panels there and harvest some electricity and add to your power. Also, wind generation. There are different kinds of wind generators now. So I like the vertical axis ones. They spin around like this, and they can catch the wind from any angle, so you don't have to be a propeller type. So a vertical axis wind can spin and keep a battery bank charged. If you have a bunch of fence posts on your property or a field or something, you put a few of those in a fence post or a vertical axis wind thing. You can keep a bunch of batteries, a battery backup bank, charged regularly and not worry about it. It's always there as a backup, you see, and it can power things in your barn or your cabin or something like that on the property, or maybe even power electric fence or something like that. So solar power can be very, very useful, but it's very hard for a modern home that uses 5,000 watts or 10,000 watts. Some of these big homes, I mean, you need a really big solar system to put in a big home, to power one of these big homes. I know some people who have had big homes, and you know what? I know a particular suburb that I went to out in Ohio, and they have some really large homes, and they don't really have very big yards, and they're definitely not good for solar, and the angles of the houses are all weird, and everyone's different, and it's not a good place for solar at all. Not at all. But except for maybe a little backup thing that powers some things out in the yard, or you know, your garden lights or something like that. You see, so to make a full use of a full-scale power solar supply unit, you need quite a substantial amount of physical room for those panels. You need a roof that's at the right angle, the right position without shade and trees on it, so that you can collect all that power and maximize it. You need a space for the batteries, you need a space for the electronics, and you need to be able to access it, and you need to be able to maintain it, because if you put those panels up on a 3-story roof, then they come in, they always say, well, free installation. Well, not really free, but they call it free. But anyway, so okay, someone comes up there and puts some solar panels on your 3rd story. Well, that's all going well for a while, until one day you got to have some service or replace them. Then they got a problem, because it's going to be very expensive. You see, the people who install the system are not necessarily going to be the ones that come back 3-4 years later and maintain it for you. See, so solar energy production for a homestead is very, very helpful to have as a backup. It's actually really good. I mean, I personally don't have one yet, but it is a really good thing, and I have some space where I could probably put it, but I haven't got to that yet. And in my lifetime here, this particular residence that I'm at, 7 years, only a couple times the power went off for any serious length of time, and you know, it really wasn't that bad, because like I said, another thing you can do with batteries is you can plug an inverter in, and if you just want to charge your phone and things like that, you can even just use a really small scale. You get a large battery. I used a marine battery, a deep cycle marine battery, a little bit larger one with a lot of cranking amps, and you put an inverter on it. And you can get enough power for some lights. If you really need lights, and you don't need a really powerful bulb, you just need like a string of white Christmas lights. They'll light up a big room, at least temporarily. So supplementary power is a really good idea for any homestead, but think carefully about the current solar installation, because it's a big decision for multiple years, and it can affect the value of your home. It can affect the attractiveness and how things move around on your property, because you got to put those solar panels somewhere. You need to put the electronics somewhere. So all those considerations come into play when you choose to add energy production to your home. And just one last note here. There's another way of producing water. If you have a stream on your property, I knew a fellow many years ago, a friend of mine, he had a a property up in Vermont, and the stream ran down the property for about 1,500 feet, and I don't know what the elevation distance was, but he ran a little generator. What you do is you direct the water through a small pipe, and because as the water goes into a smaller pipe, it goes faster and faster. It has to go faster, you see. And then when it comes out, you can make a little nozzle, and it'll spin a generator blade, you see. And you know, he had a power for his home. He had 12 batteries in the basement, so the power went there, and he could store it in the basement. 12 ordinary car battery types, wired a certain way to make 120 volts. I guess you put them in series. And so you had that kind of a system. Now, people can be ingenious about the way they set things up. Have a little bit of wind, a vertical axis wind. There's also a kind of energy production where they direct the wind through some kind of a tunnel that catches it in a big like funnel, and it gets smaller and smaller, and as it goes down, the air has to go faster and faster, and then it spins a little generator and it keeps producing some electricity. Now, like solar panels, they're not like a really power generator. It's a little bit different because it's more of a steady charge, and you have to regulate it. It's not like a, you know, there's a certain electronics that has to go with a good solar installation that makes it a little bit more complicated than most people assume. It's not just the panels. There's a whole regulation system that makes it safe and allows you to tap off on different things, and in some cases you can produce 220 volts and so on if you have a powerful enough system. So I hope I've given you some helpful information about solar use, and especially on the homestead life in cities and towns. A lot of times people do not like a lot of panels on their roofs in certain suburbs of this country. They just don't like that at all, and it just detracts from the value and so on. So anyway, I hope to hear from you in the next other videos I make, and please like and share, and I'd love to hear comments and interact with the people who listen to my videos. So again, thanks for listening, and I hope to see you again.